So here we are, of course, at the end of 2023. And as much as we want the war in Ukraine to stop, we have to recognize the reality on the ground that, you know, the Ukrainians do not want to give up 20% of their land because that is what they would be giving up. They would also be giving up 80% of their coastline. And then there's not only just that, there's the massive population that are currently behind that line that would be left to occupation and possibly all kinds of oppression by Russian authorities. There is also, as much as Russia tries to suppress it, there is currently an ongoing guerrilla campaign against Ukrainian partisans that are on there trying to sort of fight back in any way possibly that they can, both through military civil disobedience means and refusal to comply. So that's what it would mean to a lot of these people just giving up these territories, these places. And once again, I repeat the call that time and time again, that the Ukrainians have shown when they are given the equipment, the planes, the armored personnel carriers, the tanks, the artillery, the equipment they need to push the Russians back, they can. We just had, of course, the recent mass Storm Shadow strike on a Crimean port. Not in Sevastopol, but a different port of a Russian ship carrying reportedly over 4,000 artillery shells. They were basically using it as a floating ammo dump. And if you've seen the video, yeah, it's easy to believe that it really was, given the size of the explosion. And yet, if they had more Storm Shadows, more long-range missiles, they could be striking the Kerch Bridge, destroying that, making and striking other, military targets in Crimea to make that position just completely untenable. And once again, make Russian logistics almost impossible to function, which has been a key Ukrainian goal throughout all of these, throughout all this war. In fact, most of Ukraine's big key successes throughout all of this have been because, first of all, they targeted Russian logistical supply hubs, transport routes, taking out, vehicles. And because they've done that, they've eventually managed to have big successes on the battlefield. And I'm not the only one alone calling that or saying that, because then this has big impacts on Russia's capability to be able to fight. One of the constant things you hear from the bizarre pro-Russian crowd is that, oh, you don't understand, Russia is still fighting with one hand tied behind its back. It's got so much manpower that it will just flood Ukraine, and it's doing this to be kind. Yes, it's being kind by trying to strip away a ton of very valuable territory that Putin would love to get his hands on. Yes, I'm sure he is. Then if that's the case, why hasn't he done it? If they can just, quote, flood Ukraine with all this Russian manpower, why haven't they done it? Why haven't they been successful in doing that? And mostly it's because Russia's military is pretty much breaking down. That it has gone beyond the point, as we saw just through summer, that it has reached a point where it cannot even do large-scale attacks, that it can only carry out small local attacks. Not even all across the line. And now, at the end of this year, I think it is well worth repeating just the state of how bad Russia really is. And the state of its army. The fact that if we can continue to do this, they will just not be able to continue on fighting. And with Putin going to the elections, he's trying to find numerous ways. There's just been a back channel supposed way from through back channels to America to say, hey, we might like, finding a way of how we can achieve a ceasefire so long as it looks like a victory for us. Yeah, I don't think so. Putin should not be able to come away from this war claiming any sort of victory or gaining any territory from this whatsoever. That should be the message as the West, and especially as Europe, we should be rallying to at this point, now more so than ever. Because this came out. The Ministry of Defense releases regular updates, and this is one of the intelligence updates that they have come throughout all this. So, during the course of 2023, the average daily number of Russian casualties, killed and wounded, in Ukraine has risen by almost 300 per day compared to 2022. Think about that. The Russians are losing on average over 300 people per day. This is going to add up. And oh boy, as you're about to see, does this add up? So, this increase in the daily averages is reported by the Ukrainian authorities almost certainly reflects the degradation of Russia's forces and is its transition to a lower quality from a high quality mass army since the partial mobilization of reservists back in September of 2022. And it will likely take Russia 5 to 10 years to rebuild a cohort of highly trained, unexperienced military units. If casualties continue at this current rate throughout the next year, by 2025, Russia will have sustained over 500,000 personnel killed and wounded over the course of a 3-year war. This is comparable to the Soviet Union's 70,000 casualties in the 9-year Soviet-Afghan War. Now, of course, Russia, of course, will deny this, as will many, I'm sure, of the pro-Russia crowd in here, or they'll say, oh, well, what about the Ukrainian casualty figures? What about the Ukrainian casualty figures, I say, when you've got this amount of shocking deregulation, this amount of sheer, um, you know, casualty rate coming from Russia, from what we are told by you guys, is apparently meant to this massive super army that we should be constantly worrying about. Doesn't really seem like we've got that too much to worry about. And as I repeat time and again, let's give them what they need and let's let the Ukrainians finish the job. Because right now, they can prove, and they have proved time and time again, they can do it if they get what they need. So let's send more Storm Shadows. Let's send them more artillery. Let's send them more AFVs. Let's send them more tanks. Let's send them new fighter jets. Let's send them the F-16s. Heck, let's see if we can find a way to get them to send F-35s. Why not? you know, I'm sure Zelensky and the rest of the Ukrainians would love it. But there's so much more I think we can do, and especially on a sanctions level as well, because we covered recently an article about that if we really wanted to, if we wanted to go full bore, we could implement a really damaging sanctions regime. And not only that, but we should be starting to make efforts, look at overtly and covertly trying to really damage Russian supply chains, bottlenecking them and making them squeeze even more. So that is a possibility. Will David Cameron do that? Probably not. He could do. He might surprise us. But we'll see what happens. But of course, going into 2024, probably I would say probably a very important year. I would say for this war in particular. Ukraine once again goes into 2024 on a very, very good position. A very good position. So, as always, long may that victory day come for them. And of course, until then, we'll see you all very soon.